Assalamu alaikum. This is e-commerce course by Saadat Nisar. I hope that so far you are developing a good understanding of HTML and you are enjoying that. HTML basically is a very simple tool, and if you just understand its basic tags, then by practice you can easily develop, you can create your web pages. Remember, in the last lecture, I had given you an example and I had asked you to do the coding by yourself. That was the example of row span. I wanted you to create a very simple table and use the attribute row span for that particular table. You can see in the slide, that was the picture, that was the table I wanted you to create and write the code for. Did you do that? Okay, let's discuss the code in our today's lecture. As you can see, we start with the HTML tag, then the body tag. You know that all the text work, it is done in the body tag. Then to create the table, there is the table tag. I use its attribute border and keep its value 1. Then the other attribute align, I keep its value center. You know, we want the boundaries of the table to be displayed. Whenever we want that, then we use the attribute border. If we do not use this attribute border or keep its value 0, then the table although would be created, but its boundaries would not be shown. Similarly, by virtue of align attribute, we can locate, we can fix the position of this table. So where align attributes value is center, the table would be displayed at the center of the browser window. Then we use the tr tag. Remember that we use tr tag to create a row. So to create the first row, we use the tr tag. Then to create the first cell within this row, we use the td tag. And here I have used the row span attribute for the first cell in the first td, and I have kept its value as 2, which would mean that this cell would be stretched up to 2 rows. That is the use of row span. Then I write the word cell1 in this table. I close this td, and then in order to create the second cell within this first row, I again use another td tag, and in this td I do not use any row span. I simply write the word cell2. I close this second td, and then I close this first tr. Thereafter, for creating the second row, I again use the tr tag, and in that tr tag I use just one td, and in that td I write the word cell3. Then I close this td, I close the second tr, I close the table tag, close the body tag, close the HTML tag, and the result is as you had earlier seen. If you recall, I also mentioned in the previous lecture that one of the attributes of table tag is bg color, as also background. Background and bg color both are the attributes that can be used in the table tag in order to provide some background color or provide some background image to that table. Remember, how do we give the background color or background image to a particular web page? Okay, you must recall that in the body tag we use these attributes bg color and background to provide the background color or the background image. Wherever we want the background image to be displayed, in the body tag we use the attribute background, and where we want to give just a particular color instead of background, then we use the attribute bg color in the body tag. So similarly, in case of table also, we can specifically provide certain background colors, certain background images with the help of the same attributes bg color and background. Also, in order to give a specific background color or image to a certain row or even to a certain cell or a column, we can also use the same attributes, the color and background, and in addition we can individually allocate, provide different background colors or different background images to the rows or cells also. So this is just a refresher about tables. Let's move on to our next topic, which is forms or web forms. Web forms are those special pages which are created to get some information, some input from users. So therefore, on all such pages through which we get some information, some comments from our users, we can say these are web forms. Web forms can be of different types. So therefore, on a web page, if there are certain command buttons displayed like the submit button, then we can say it's a form. Similarly, we can have radio buttons, check boxes, text area, text boxes, all these different types of options, they create web forms and they are primarily used to receive the comments, the input from the users. If you remember, we discussed this concept at a basic level in our previous lecture, and I told you that in order to create a web form, the syntax is that we use a form tag. So within the body tag, we use a special tag, form tag, and it has its end tag. In the form tag, we use two very important attributes. One attribute is action, and the value of this attribute action is normally kept as that URL to which we want the information on this form to be transported, to be supplied. So through action attribute, in fact, we would supply the information that we receive from the user, say to a particular application or a program which is running on the server side and whose URL is given as value of the attribute action. It may be an ASP application file or a JSP or a servlet. You will study that later. Then another attribute method is also used in the form tag, and we keep method's value as post. We write the keyword post wherever we use action equal the URL, we keep the value method as post. Then within the form tag, we use a special tag, that is input tag. We use a special attribute, type attribute in the input tag, and we keep the value of this attribute type in a different way. So wherever we want to create, in fact, a submit button, we keep the value of this type attribute as submit in the input tag. So therefore, because of the type submit, the browser would automatically at that particular place create for us a submit button. We can have different labels on that submit button. For that, we can use another attribute, value attribute, in the input tag, and we can keep different values for this attribute value, and whatever label or value we give to this value attribute, that would be written on the submit button. If we do not use the value attribute, then by default the browser would write the word submit on a submit button. It would be a good thing to mention that submit button does a very important function for us. So when we click at the submit button, all the information contained in the web form that is transported or sent to the URL which has been given as a value of the attribute action. So if that URL is that of an application file, all this information through form by clicking the submit button would automatically be sent to that address, to that URL. And that application then later on can use this information in different ways. Then there is another button, reset button. Reset button is in fact created when we want the information on the web form to be clear. So if somebody has erroneously, by mistake, typed certain wrong values in the form, in the text boxes, then with the help of reset button, all this information can be cleared, and the web form would again be open for the user for his use. It would be opened afresh. Then there can be different types of buttons that we can add on our web form. For that purpose, we use again the input tag, and in the type attribute, we keep the value now as button. Example is that wherever we want to display an add button on the web form, for example, then we keep the type attribute value as button, and then we use the value attribute in the same input tag, and we can write a label that we want to be displayed on that button. So wherever we want to create an add button, we can keep the type as button, and value we can keep as add. So automatically a button would be created on which the word add would be written. Then we can also keep the type attributes value as password. You may have noticed that there are certain text boxes, certain rectangles in which we write some information, and that information is automatically converted into asterisks. For example, when there is a text box to enter our password, when we write our password, that information is automatically converted into asterisks. That is because in the code we choose the value of the type attribute as password. So where type is password, its value is password, all the information in that text box, that would be automatically converted into asterisks. Okay, then there are two very important type of forms that we can use. One type is check boxes and the other radio buttons. They have a slightly different function, but both are used for receiving some information, some input from the users. We use text boxes when we want our users to type or write with the help of keyword certain information in some rectangles, some boxes. So in order to create a text box, the syntax is that we write the input tag within the form tag, and we keep the type attribute equal to the word text. So wherever type attribute is equal to text, browser would automatically create a box, a text box or a rectangle for us wherein the user can type certain information. The text box can also have a unique field name. Therefore, in the input tag, if we use an attribute name, we can keep the attribute name's value, any logical value. For example, if I want to create a text box for entering the first name of a person, then the logical field name for that text box would be the word first. That name attribute's value, which I keep first, that would be in fact utilized by the server side. Your form would be created without using the name attribute and its value first, but wherever you want the information on the text box to be utilized by the server, there it is good that you use the name attribute and keep any logical value of that text box. This value is then used by the server. Say if the server through an application wants to acknowledge a message to you, then the server can always interact with you with the help of this information. The server can say, send an acknowledgement message. Well, first Sadat, last Nisar, we have received your order. This order will be processed in such and such time. Thank you for your order. Therefore, the point I am making is that these values of the name attribute, these field values, they are basically for the server side, through which, making them a reference point, the server would communicate with the client side. First and last in this example, they are the field values, and the server side would use these values first and last to interact with the client. The text boxes are used to receive some limited information from the users. Wherever we are interested in getting some detailed information from the users, then these text boxes, they are not suitable. In fact, we require a bigger area wherein we want the users to put in there, to key in or type their comments. For that, we use text area tag. A text area tag has its corresponding closing tag. The input tag has no corresponding closing tag. In the text area tag, we use two attributes, calls and rows, and we keep some value of these attributes, calls and rows, and whatever values we assign to these attributes, consequently, accordingly, the browser would create a large text area box for us, and the size of that box would be according to the values of the rows and columns that we had specified in the text area tag. And then the user can type some information, some detailed answer in that text area. If you recall, I had discussed with you a simple example of text boxes and text area in our previous lecture. I want you to have a look at that example again. Remember, we had seen this web page. Today's burning question, then first name. Against these words first name, there is a text box in which user is given the idea, the user is given a hint that he should type his first name. Then the last name, there is again a text box in front of the words last name where the user has to type his last name. And then there is a question which says, today's burning question, how to make Pakistan a developed nation. And then for answer, please enter your answer in the text area below, and you can see the bigger rectangle, the bigger box in which the user should type the answer. And then at the bottom there are two buttons. One is the submit button on which the label is I know, and then there is a reset button which is used to clear any information on the web form. Let me mention one thing here. that the size of this text area, it would be specified although with the help of rows and calls attributes, but the answer is not limited or confined to this size. Say if you have a more detailed answer which cannot be fitted in this box, then automatically the browser would create a scroll bar for you and you can write further. So your answer is not confined to just 10 rows and 60 columns. This is the size of the text box, text area box. Your answer can even be expanded, it can be further, and you can then write further. The scroll bar would appear which can then scroll downwards. So this is the main concept about the text boxes and text areas. Then I want to talk about the attributes of text boxes. There are three important attributes of text boxes. One is the attribute value. So where input type equal text, value equal http://, that means that whatever information I have used as value of the attribute value in the input tag to create text box, that information http://, that would automatically appear in the text box, that would be prefixed in the text box. So whenever a user opens a web form on which this text box is available, then this information http://, that would be pre-written. The user would not be required independently to type http://. That would be prefixed, pre-written for the user to save a user's effort. Normally when we want to create a text box where we want the user to type a URL, then we can use this value attribute in the input tag, through which we can then prefix these words http://, because every URL starts with this information. So instead of user to type this information, to save the typing effort of the user, we can prefix or pre-write this information. Then size is another attribute of the text boxes. Using this attribute, we can fix the size of the rectangle of the text box. Its value, say if I write size equal 40, that would mean that please create a text box for me whose size, whose width is such that it can accommodate, it can hold up to 40 characters in it. Through size attribute, therefore, we can specify this thing. Then another attribute is max length. Using this attribute, we can limit the user, we can restrict the user from writing beyond a certain limit. For example, if I use max length attribute for a text box and I keep its value as 3, then that would mean that user cannot type more than 3 digits or characters in this box. The user not be allowed to type beyond 3 places. So that was the main discussion about text boxes and text areas. Let's now see how do we create checkboxes. For creating checkboxes, the syntax says that in the form tag, we again use the input tag, and in the type attribute of the input tag, we keep the value as checkbox. We write the keyword checkbox as value of the type attribute. Then consequently, the browser would create small squares or checkboxes for us at that spot, and then the users can check these boxes or uncheck them, and in this way, in this fashion, they can provide their input to the server side. There is an attribute that is used for checkboxes. That attribute is checked. So what does this checked attribute do for us? Wherever this attribute checked is used, that value, that option would then be pre-checked. Whenever we open a web page on checkboxes are applied and checked attribute is used, then for that option, there would be, the checkbox would be pre-checked by the browser. In this way, the typing effort of the user would be saved. Wherever users, they frequently select a particular option, then to save their typing effort or to give them a clue, sometimes you use the checked attribute and that option is then pre-checked. You should remember one thing, that we use checkboxes where we want our users to give their input either true or false or yes or no. So wherever the possible answers, the possible options are yes or no or true or false, the ideal option for us is to create checkboxes. Now, in the example that you will see in the slide, there are different phobias or fears listed, and the user through the checkboxes is being asked to tell what option applies to that particular user. So as you can see, the web page starts, describe your phobia. It is in the heading format. Then the question is, what is your phobia? Please check all that apply. And underneath there are 4 different options listed against the check boxes. First option is fear of water. Second, fear of becoming bald. Third, fear of becoming locked inside. And fourth is fear of flying. You can see the fourth option, this is pre-checked. This is because of the checked attribute which was used for this particular option, and therefore the user would not be required to check this particular option. Obviously, the user can uncheck it, then it would be unchecked, but when the user would open this page, this option would be pre-checked. Then there are at the bottom 2 buttons, submit button and reset button. Let's have a look at the code behind this result. We start with the form tag, form action equal, there is a URL, that URL is that of an ASP file, an application where this result, this information is to be sent. Then what is italic tag? Your italic tag closed. So you should understand now that because of the italic tag, the word your would become italic, as you just saw in the result. Then the word phobia, and then please check all that apply. Because of the paragraph tag, there would be a line break, a line space, and after that you see there are 4 different input tags to create 4 different checkboxes or 4 different options. So in the first input tag, type equal checkbox, name water, because that option related to water, so logically I gave the name, the field name to the name attribute as water. That information is for the server side. And then I have written the words fear of water. Because of the break tag, there would be a line break at that spot, and then would be a second checkbox created for me with the help of the second input tag. Second input tag, again type checkbox, name, now bald, because the second option relates to fear of becoming bald, so I have kept its field name as bald. And then the text fear of becoming bald, that appears. Then the third checkbox, name lock. The words are fear of being logged inside. Then comes the fourth option, input type checkbox, name flying. And you can see after the word flying, there is the attribute checked. So because of this attribute checked, this option, that is fear of flying, that would be pre-checked. When the user would open the page, this option would already be checked. Then break tag would create a line break, a paragraph tag, so line break, line space because of that. And then to create two buttons, input type submit, value submit, input type reset, this would create the two submit and reset buttons. Then I close the form tag, close the body tag, and then I close the HTML tag. So dear students, you saw that with the help of input tag, keeping its type attributes value checkbox, I was able to create different checkboxes, and with the help of these checkboxes, I had asked the user to provide his feedback, his input, his information. Let me make one thing clear here, that as I mentioned, checkboxes are basically used when we want to give just two options to the users, yes or no, true or false. So therefore, if you critically examine this example, you find out that basically the user is asked 4 different questions, and each question has yes or no or true or false answer. So first question is, are you afraid of water? Yes or no. If you are afraid of water, check. If you are not, you keep it unchecked. Then fear of becoming bald, fear of being locked inside, fear of flying. All these subsequent 3 options, they are in fact 3 different questions. And a user may say that, okay, all this applies to me. I am afraid of all these 4 different things. So in that case, the user is permitted, the user can check all these 4 check boxes against these 4 different options. That would be doable. Okay, keeping this thing in mind, then we can see another option, the radio buttons for web forms. The basic difference between the check boxes and radio buttons is that in case of radio buttons, you have more than 2 options, say 3, 4, 5 different options for a particular question, and the user then can use the radio buttons to select just one option. The user can't pick more than 1 options. The user is just restricted to select one option with the help of radio buttons. Radio buttons, basically, they are small circles, and when you select a radio button, a dot appears to mark, to identify your selection. The syntax to create a radio button is that within the form tag, we now use the input tag and we keep the type attribute value as the word radio. Wherever, therefore, the type attribute is radio, the browser would automatically then create a small circle called a radio button as an option for the user. There are again 2 attributes within the input tag that is used for radio buttons. One is the name attribute, and you can select any logical name which relates to the theme of your question. Say if my question relates to the income level, then for that matter, the name attribute should have the field value as income. This attribute name again is for the server side. Your radio buttons can be created without using this name attribute. Then another attribute is value attribute. The value attribute refers to the theme of that particular option. So if the theme of my option is below the poverty line or this poverty, I can keep the value attributes value as logically poverty. Remember, both these name and value attributes, they are for the server side. The checked attribute, as it could be used for the checkboxes, can also be used for radio buttons. So therefore, the option that you want to be pre-selected or pre-checked, you can use for that option the attribute as checked. And therefore, when the page containing radio buttons would open, that option for the user would be pre-checked, saving the typing effort or selection effort of the user. Now, I want to show you an example here. You can see in the slide, there is a survey being conducted with the help of radio buttons, and the users are asked two different questions. One is, which of the following best describes your current income level? And then there are three possible answers which are listed with the help of radio buttons. One is living below the poverty line. Second option, living at the level of middle class. You can see this option is pre-checked. The radio button has a green dot in it that shows that it is pre-checked. And then the third option is living at the level of upper class. So whatever applies, then the user out of these three different options can only pick one. The user is restricted to just pick one option. The second question is, which of the following best describes your political inclination? And now there are four possible answers which are listed. Number one, workers of Nationalist Party. You can see this option is pre-checked. There must be a checked attribute in relation to this option then. Then the second option is member of Socialist Party. The third radio button is the third option, supporter of Republican Party. And then the fourth option is none of the above. User again out of these four can only pick one. Number one option is pre-checked, pre-selected. If the user is not happy with this, it is not his answer, then the user, whatever his answer is, can check that answer, and then the dot, green dot, would appear against that option. So if the user selects none of the above, the dot on the first option would shift to the option number 4. Let's have a look at the code which has resulted into this web page. As you can see in the slide, in the body tag there is a heading, survey, then the form tag, action, there is a URL, method, post, then the question runs, which of the following best describes your current income level? There are two break tags which would cause a line break, a line space, and then there would be the input tag, input. You can see I have kept the type as a radio, and then name equals income, value equal poverty, and then I have written the words living below the poverty line. So because of that, your first radio button would be created. Then the second input tag, input type, again radio, name, again income, value is middle, and this is checked. So you can see this option would be pre-checked, and I have written living at the level of middle class. Then the third option, input type equal radio, name income, value upper, and then I've written living at the level of upper class. So here you can notice one thing, then that the three radio buttons that I have created, for these three radio buttons, the value of the name attribute is the same, which is income. So wherever we want to create a group of radio buttons, we always keep the name attribute in all those input tags the same. Then we can vary anyhow the value of the value attribute. So if the theme of your option is poverty, I can keep the value attributes value as poverty, then middle, and accordingly where the option is about upper class, I can keep the value as upper. For the second question of the survey, which of the following best describes your political inclination? And there are 4 different options listed as answer to this question. Input type radio. Now the theme of the question is politics, so I have kept the value of the name attribute as politics. Then value attributes value I have kept as nationalist, and I have checked it, and the words written are worker of nationalist party. So accordingly you saw that the first option in this category is pre-checked because of the checked attribute. For second option, again for the second input tag radio type radio name politics, again you should now be clear about this thing that we keep the same value for the name attributes in all options within a particular group. Then value socialist, because the theme of this option is socialist, so logically I thought I should keep the value of the value attribute socialist. Then for the third option, type radio name politics value Republican, and I have written the word supporter of Republican Party. The fourth option, input type radio name again politics, because this relates to that politics question, value none, and I have written none of the above. So therefore there will be 4 radio buttons created because of these 4 input tags carrying the type attribute value as radio, and then the user would be free to select any option, although the first option, the worker of nationalist, that is checked, pre-checked because of the checked attribute. For the 2 buttons, input type equals submit, value submit, input type preset, these 2 buttons as you saw are appearing therefore at the bottom. Then you may have noticed that on certain websites, when we access those websites, there are certain selection lists which are displayed there. For example, which countries have you visited last year, and then there will be a list, 5-7 different countries would be named, would be listed, and you would be required to choose any country or countries which you have visited. So that concept is called the selection list. It's again a type of web form using which you receive some information from your users. Whenever you make a selection, then a blue bar records your selection. Your selection is then appearing in the background of a blue bar when you select it. To create a selection list, there are 2 tags that we must know. One is the select tag, and it has got its ending tag. Within the select tag, we use the special option tag. So whatever different options for list that we want to give to our user, we list all those options within the option tag. So in this way we can create different lists. As was the case with checkboxes and radio buttons, that there was a checked attribute used to pre-check, to pre-select an option. Similarly, in case of selection lists also, there is an attribute prescribed. That attribute is selected. Therefore, which option you want your users to select, or which option you think it is frequently selected, you make that option pre-selected by virtue of this attribute selected used in that particular option tag. So in the example before you, you see there are in fact 3 different types of lists that I have created. First of all, first list relates to nationality. Select your nationality, and then there is a selection list which contains different options. You can see there is also a scroll bar which is appearing, and the size of the box that contains these options is 4, which means that this box displays 4 options for you. Then in the second type of list, select your favorite city, and you can see there is a drop down list with the arrow sign. When you click this arrow sign, then these options, they would be listed before you. In the third type of list, I have mentioned countries visited last year, and at the bottom there are 5 different options listed for selection. How do we create these different lists? Let's see the code that has given this type of result. As you can see, we start with the body tag, then there is the form tag, action, there is a URL, method post, and then select your nationality : these words, this text would appear as it is. Because of the paragraph tag, then there would be a line break, a line space, and then the select tag would start. Name equals nationality. Again, this attribute name relates to the field name. This is optional. If we want to interact with the server side, we can use this attribute and keep its value, some logical value that relates to the theme. And then I have used the attribute size, keeping its value 4. So by using this attribute size equal 4, the browser would create a box of a size that can show, that can display up to 4 options on it. This select tag has a corresponding closing tag, and within this pair of select tags, in fact, I have used 7 option tags to create a list. First option tag, the option I give is American, then the option tag closed. Then the second option tag, I write Australian, option closed. Third, Hungarian. Fourth, Indian. Fifth option tag relates to Iranian. And the 6th option tag, you can see in the 6th option tag, I have used the attribute selected. And before closing this option tag, I have written the word, the nationality, Pakistani. So because of this selected attribute, the option Pakistani would be pre-selected for the user. So it would be shown in the blue bar. Then the 7th option, French, option closed, and then the select closed. So you can see in the slide the option Pakistani is selected, and the counting would be done from bottom. When the browser would open this page, the counting would be done from the bottom because the browser has to show this selected option. If the option was not selected as Pakistani, then the browser would have opened this page with the first option, American option, appearing at the top in the list. Then the second type of list, again I use a select tag. Select your favorite city is my theme, is the question. Select name, name city, again this is a field name. Option, there are in fact 3 different options. First option is Sydney, then option closed. Second option tag contains London, option closed. Then the third option tag has the word selected, the attribute selected, and I have listed the word Lahore in that option, and this select tag is then closed. Because again I have used the selected attribute, therefore the word Lahore would be pre-selected. You may notice one thing, that in this example of a list, I have not used the size attribute as I had done in the earlier case. So by omitting the size attribute, by not using the size attribute, automatically the browser would create a drop down list for us. As you can see again in the result, you can see because I had pre-selected Lahore by selected attribute, therefore the Lahore, although it is option number 3, but when the browser would open this page, because it is a selected option, therefore it would keep it at the top, and the first 2 options, they would be underneath this. It is a drop down because I have not used the size attribute. Now the third type of a list, the countries visited last year. And now in this example, I have used the size attribute, keeping its value 5, and you can notice I have used another attribute here, that is multiple. And then there are 5 different options. One is Canada, second Russia, third England, fourth Egypt, and fifth is Saudi Arabia. And then I close the select tag, I close the body tag, close the HTML tag. You can go back to the result. You can see because size was 5, therefore the box was created of such a size that it could hold or display 5 options. Since there were just 5 options in this particular example, therefore there is no scroll bar appearing, right? Secondly, because of the multiple attribute, the user would be in a position to select more than one options. So if I have visited Canada, England, and Saudi Arabia for that matter in the last year, I can select all these 3 different options. What I need to do is I can use my control key or shift key to make more than one selections. This is because of the multiple attribute which I used in this particular case. This multiple attribute in fact allows me to select more than one options. Again, by using a reset button, I can wipe out all the information and make this page anew, afresh for use. So dear students, in our today's lecture we have seen mainly the discussion on web forms, we have seen radio buttons, we have discussed about checkboxes, selection lists, etc. In the subsequent lecture, inshallah, we shall be dealing with frames. That is another very important topic, and we'll talk about that in a subsequent lecture. Till then, Allah Hafiz.